I think one day I'm gonna make it.
Goran, you convinced a lot of people you will win Wimbledon someday. Thank you.
Wimbledon is tennis's most prestigious tournament, featuring the world's top 128 players fighting in a single elimination bracket. These select 128 are then given a ranking to determine the matchups in the opening rounds. In the 130-year history of the tournament, only one player seated outside the top 16 ever took home the title. This was 17-year-old Boris Becker, who shocked the world as the 64th ranked player. But there was one winner even more unlikely than Becker, who just scraped into Wimbledon as a wildcard, one of 8 players who didn't crack the top 100 and were instead chosen based on name and past performance, expected to spice up the earlier rounds. So how did this player, who was counted out before the first serve, become the sole anomaly who claimed victory? This is the story of Goran Ivanisevic, Wimbledon's greatest underdog.
You know, my journey started 41 years ago.
Set match. Ivanisevic.
With Sampras is definitely is a guy who ruined my life.
So how many aces will this man serve in this match?
Huge magic. A lot of ups and downs.
A little spark, a little fire.
In 2018, French tennis player Cedric Pioline was asked in an interview, who was the craziest player you ever faced? His response, Goran Ivanisevic.
You have to show the emotions. You can't keep everything inside. You're gonna break.
Broken rackets are not uncommon in the world's most frustrating sport. Numerous highly ranked players have thrown temper tantrums on the court, and Ivanisevic was no exception. His first time playing tennis at 7 years old, he came home with a smashed racket, a trend that would continue well into his professional career. And while he wouldn't reach Marat Safin's record of over 700 career broken rackets, he would hold an even more embarrassing record.
Big players on the ATP Tour. The Croatian star proved it once again on Thursday. The 3-time Wimbledon finalist was eliminated from the Brighton Open because he ran out of rackets. Ivanisevic smashed 3 rackets in his second-round match against South Korea's Hyun Taek Lee and was forced to abandon it through the lack of appropriate equipment.
Ivanisevic remains the only player ever to forfeit a match due to a lack of suitable equipment, as put by official Gary Armstrong.
Out of the records, and then I broke all the records. I have to in Brighton, and then I had to stop the match at 2-1 in the third. It's the first time in the history. You didn't know that, huh? 2-1 against I don't know who, and I just said to, and Alan Mills was the referee. He didn't know what to say.
But he was also the man who once held the record for most aces at Wimbledon for nearly 2 decades, being described by other players as near unstoppable. When he was on his game, that is. Goran himself described it as having like 3 different personalities: the good, the mad, and the emergency, when he quickly needed to pull himself together in a match. This led to him becoming the most unpredictable athlete in the history of tennis. As an unknown 17-year-old, he traveled alone from his homeland of Croatia to Oceania in order to compete in the Australian Open qualifiers, in what he ironically calls the worst day of his life. Before I left, my father told me, "I've got bad news. Your sister is sick, and we have to take care of her. So you're on your own." The illness was deadly, and the treatment was expensive. So with 0 hours of sleep, Ivanisevic finished in the top 8 of qualifiers and jumped straight into the Australian Open, where he would continue his unthinkable winning streak, defeating 15-seed John Fitzgerald in 4 sets in the second round, and coming back from an 0-2 deficit against Leo Laval in the 4th, finally being upended in the quarterfinals in straight sets. In an instant, Goran jumped to the 121st ranked player in the world, and in typical style took home his cash winnings stuffed in a jacket pocket, which he refused to take off the entire flight home, sweltering in his own heat and exhaustion for nearly 24 hours. On the court, Ivanisevic was a serve and volleyer, who played a fast and aggressive game suited to grass courts like Wimbledon. Standing at 6'4", he dominated his opponents with a powerful left-hand serve, often reaching speeds of 145 miles per hour. Legendary grass champion Pete Sampras will be important later in our story. Once said that when Goran's serve was on, it was basically unreturnable on grass, the surface used in Wimbledon. So it was expected that if Ivanisevic was to win a Grand Slam, it would be in the land of the rose. He quickly got his chance in 1990 when he was set to face defending champion Boris Becker in the semifinals. Ivanisevic was coming off a 27-ace thrashing in the quarters and had all the confidence in the world. When asked by the LA Times if he was worried about Becker, he replied, "No. It's going to be difficult for him, I am sure. He's going to have a lot of trouble with me." The match reached a tiebreaker in the fourth set, with Becker leading 2-1. The ever-emotional Ivanisevic could be seen beating himself up after nearly every point. Despite his status as an unseeded player, he genuinely believes that he will defeat the defending champion. For an 18-year-old to reach this level of success at Wimbledon is almost unprecedented. Well, except for the guy facing him opposite the court, the man who won Wimbledon at 17, and proved to be a little too much for the young Croatian.
That's it. It's all over. Three sets to one. 4-6, 7-6, 6-1, 7-6.
Goran, you were serving for a two-set lead. Did Wimbledon and center court make you nervous then?
I was not nervous at all. Before the match I said to myself, let's go, let's win, let's try, without pressure. We're playing against defending champion. I was not nervous at all.
Do you think that this match will announce to the world that you have arrived as a potential champion?
And it is his time off. A truly remarkable performance in very difficult conditions. Ferocious serving of a quality and a mark.
Goran beat defending champion Pete Sampras in straight sets at the 91 Manchester final. It was his first title on grass and placed him in the 10 seed in Wimbledon later that month, giving him all the momentum in the world to improve upon his semi-final performance last year. Knowing Goran Ivanisevic, though, nothing was ever for sure. In what is now known as one of the biggest upsets in Wimbledon history, Goran lost in 4 sets to a wildcard entry, someone happy just to participate. When asked about the match, Ivanisevic himself couldn't understand how he lost. The man could hardly play tennis. He was some kind of tennis coach. He drives his car and there's a sticker on it that says tennis coach. Man, did I make some strange characters famous. I was in luck that there weren't betting houses then. Someone would have suspected I was losing on purpose. In the 92 Wimbledon tournament, Goran Ivanisevic was the player to beat. After a tough draw, he was set to face Czech-American Ivan Lendl in the round of 16, a player he had never beaten in their 4 previous matchups. Lendl is widely regarded as one of the greatest tennis players of all time, amassing 8 Grand Slam titles in the past 8 years. And nearing the end of his career, he had won nearly every major tournament, including the Australian Open, French Open, and US Open. The only one he had left for a career Grand Slam was Wimbledon. Unfortunately for Lendl, that title would elude him for another year.
Lendl has never won at Wimbledon, and he had to retire from his match this afternoon against Goran Ivanisevic.
Despite being thrashed 2 sets in a row by Ivanisevic, the story in the media was all about Lendl's exit, leaving Goran to quietly move along to the semifinals against the 2-seed Stefan Edberg.
So now the action from that Edberg-Ivanisevic match. Final set, and Edberg's trailing 3-4. He's also facing break point. Pete Sampras, the top seed left in, as anticipated, had trouble with the explosive serve of Ivanisevic.
Ivanisevic then bested Sampras once again with an astonishing 36 aces en route to the climactic 92 finals.
At Wimbledon, in boxing terms, an ideal matchup. Ivanisevic is the puncher, Agassi the counter-puncher.
In the classic unstoppable force against immovable object, the force of Goran's serve was heavily favored against Agassi's return. Ivanisevic was 2-0 against Agassi in his career, defeating him on both clay and concrete courts. So the common consensus was that on the short grass of Wimbledon, Ivanisevic's serve would have an even larger advantage against Agassi's return. It was a question of whether Goran would win in 3, 4, or 5 sets. However, coming into the 4th set, it was clear that Goran's hubris had let him down again.
So everything was kind of going according to schedule. Goran's doing his thing and I'm trying hard to fight it off. First game of the 2nd set, I get one opportunity to break serve, and I do.
Battles to take the early lead in the 2nd.
First game of the 3rd set, same thing.
Yeah!
Ivanisevic slams the ball, now the racket.
As though he was struck by lightning, Ivanisevic rallies in the fourth set and takes it 6-1, giving him all the momentum in the world heading into the final hour.
Even at 2 apiece.
When that fourth set ended, I just had to put it up behind me.
Ooh. Love 15. His 6th double fault.
Put psychological pressure on him.
When he double faulted twice in a row and then missed his first serve on the next point, so he missed 5 consecutive serves, I literally thought he might be on the verge of just handing this match to me.
Goran Ivanisevic at 20, so close. Wimbledon final, and you came so close. What was the difference in this match?
No, he played good. I mean, first 3 sets. When I won the first set, I was not concentrating on my serve like before. He broke me twice in the beginning of the second set, in the third set.
4-5, what happened? 2 double faults in a row.
I don't know what happened. I mean, it was a little bit windy, I was a little bit nervous, and then on a 34, I missed easy volley, and that's it. I mean,
despite serving a Wimbledon record 206 aces over the entire tournament, with 37 coming in the final against Agassi, his strongest asset would let him down when it mattered the most. A trend that would continue to haunt him throughout his career. In professional sports, it's rather uncanny how many times an athlete or a team's greatest strength serves as their downfall. In 1998, American football player Gary Anderson would do what no other kicker has done before and achieve a perfect season, making all 94 of his attempted kicks in the regular season. In that year's NFC Championship game, Anderson's Vikings were on the verge of making the Super Bowl. Up 7 with only 2 minutes left, all Anderson had to do was kick a 38-yard field goal to put the game out of reach.
Anderson hasn't missed in 2 years. Biggest field goal, the answer is probably yes. 39 yards away. And it's not good.
The Vikings would go on to lose 30-27 and become the first team in NFL history to miss the Super Bowl after a 15-1 record. Despite holding the only perfect season in NFL history, Gary Anderson is only remembered as the guy who couldn't get it done when it mattered the most, a fate that Goran Ivanisevic was beginning to share.
A moment of silence was observed for Drazen Petrovic. The net star was killed on Monday evening in a car accident in Germany. Petrovic was a native of Croatia.
Tragedy had struck Goran's life just 2 weeks before the '93 Wimbledon. And despite claiming he would fight harder than ever for his friend, his heart clearly just wasn't in it. Losing in the third round to Todd Martin after embarrassing 6-0 defeat in the 5th set, it was as though he had just given up on the match. Ivanisevic would return to the Wimbledon finals in 1994, which many would argue is the prime of his career. He was seeded 4th, but would reach the number 2 in the world soon after the tournament. He took his identity as a moody and streaky player and ran with it, demolishing his competition in the opening rounds of the tournament. In fact, up until the finals, Goran had only lost a single set. He was near unbeatable. But there was another man on the other side of the bracket, considered even more unbeatable than Ivanisevic, his old friend and rival, Pete Sampras. Since their match in the Manchester final, Goran held a 3-2 record against Sampras, including his 36-ace victory back in the semis of '92. But things were different now. Sampras was the number 1 ranked player in the world, having won Wimbledon, the US Open, and Australian Open within the past year. 3 of the 4 Grand Slams, tennis's biggest tournaments. He would be tough. Before we jump into this pivotal moment, it's important to understand why Wimbledon is so different from the other Grand Slams. Tennis is unique in the fact that different events are played on 4 main types of surfaces: hard, clay, carpet, and grass, though carpet has been primarily ruled out in the past few years. The French Open uses soft clay courts, dramatically slowing the speed of the ball. Strong defensive players thrive in this format, being able to handle the stronger serves of players like Ivanisevic and Sampras with relative ease. The US and Australian Opens are played on hard concrete, the material you're likely to find at your local tennis courts. This is considered an all-around surface, meaning that everyone is playing on similar footing. And finally, Wimbledon uses grass courts, shortcut grass on tightly packed soil. On this material, the ball moves the fastest and bounces the lowest, giving a huge advantage to powerful servers like Sampras and Ivanisevic, leading to more aces, shorter rallies, and shorter games. With that in mind, the '94 final would be one of the shortest matches in Wimbledon history, and would ultimately change the game forever.
Center court
Wimbledon, another unusually warm day, temperature well over 100 degrees in the sun.
The day of the match was unusually hot for an English July, with the temperature rising well above 30 degrees Celsius, adding a unique twist on tennis's usually most stable condition, the ball. When heated up to extreme temperatures, the gas inside begins to expand, heightening the pressure inside the ball and causing it to bounce higher. So the match began, and something strange started to unfold. The highly touted Wimbledon finals had turned into a serving practice on a Sunday afternoon. Neither player would earn a single break until the third set, in which Ivanisevic crumbled like the sand. Sampras had taken the first two sets 7-6 after a couple tiebreakers, and the mighty Croatian simply lost his will to fight. You can see it in both their body languages throughout the final set, Sampras knowing he's won, and Ivanisevic knowing he's been cooked in the hot sun. The game itself was seen as boring, and media outlets pushed the message that this was not the tennis the public wanted to see. So before the following year, Wimbledon officials introduced a slower ball, intended to weaken the strength of the serve. The goal was to make the tournament more attractive to the audience and increase the amount of longer rallies. And while this is touted to have been effective, looking back over the old footage on YouTube, the crowd seems very engaged and excited to watch some of the most powerful serves ever seen from Sampras and Ivanisevic.
Across the net, Goran Ivanisevic delivers the game's most devastating serve, but his career is more marked by what he hasn't accomplished.
The following years at Wimbledon saw one of the most dominant runs in tennis history. Not by Ivanisevic, but by his rival, Pete Sampras. The two combatants are known, along with a small number of others, as some of the greatest servers of all time. So in an era dominated by fast courts and strong serves, it would be fair to say that Ivanisevic was quite unlucky that Sampras was around. If not, it may have been him standing on the podium with all the glory. Second-place athletes are not so uncommon in the world of individual sports. People who would otherwise be the best if not for another worldly talent in front of them. One of the more famous examples is American swimmer Shirley Babashoff, who is currently tied for the record for the most Olympic silver medals with 6. During the 1976 Summer Olympics in Montreal, she finished second in the 200, 400, 800, and 4x100 meter relay. It doesn't appear too heartbreaking until you discover the athletes in front of her were all from the East German team, who were found guilty of doping after the race. And while she would never win an Olympic gold medal in an individual competition, she would get her revenge in the 4x100 free relay.
They finally got a gold medal. The United States has got one. They beat East Germany. You think Babashoff isn't happy, and Canada gets the...
Though Sampras obviously never engaged in doping, he was still responsible for many of Ivanisevic's grueling defeats.
They'll play one set for the men's final.
One set take all. How do you see it now? Who would you pick right now?
Well, I'm going to take Pete. I'm going to stick with my original pick. But Goran has shown some flashes of brilliance, and he's played with more mental toughness than I've seen in the past. So Pete's got his work cut out for him, but I just feel on this occasion he's going to come through in the end.
Ivanisevic with a reputation that he'll eventually find a game that he'll beat himself.
But this could really turn his whole career around. If you were to win this 5th set here against Pete Sampras, go on and win Wimbledon, that tag of being mentally weak would be gone.
So the man who led beat Pete Sampras, Goran Ivanisevic.
Even after all of these defeats, Goran remained confident ahead of their 17th career matchup in the '98 Wimbledon finals. That was the first time in my life I played Sampras believing that he couldn't beat me. Despite being just 26 years of age, Ivanisevic's career had begun a slow decline due to a history of strange injuries, and this marked one of his final opportunities to get over the hump of Pete Sampras and take home that illustrious Wimbledon title.
Fantastic shot. Again, 7-set Sampras. 7 games to 6. 1 set all.
Guessed right. 3 set points.
Game in 3rd set Sampras. 6 games to 4. He goes with.
That's it.
Going into the 5th and final set, everyone could feel the pressure on Goran Ivanisevic. A player who notoriously folded when it mattered the most, who lacked discipline and got in his own head, who could never win the big game and always seemed to fall apart in the final set against Sampras. And well,
championship points. Yes, he's done it. And for Goran Ivanisevic, he joins Fred Stolle as a man who reached the final here 3 times and failed 3 times.
In the first 4 sets, he accumulated over 30 aces, but in the 5th, he nailed only 2. His biggest weapon once again turned against him. For a player to feel this level of confidence heading into what he believes may be the final opportunity of his career, just to lose against the same man, in the same way, because of his inability to close out a match, is soul-crushing. Especially for a man like Ivanisevic, who's so hard on himself and often lets his emotions get the best of him. The following 3 years could only be described as a living nightmare, with Goran's injuries taking over his God-given gift to play tennis. It wasn't only traditional knee or shoulder injuries as well, with far more wacky and stranger wounds taking him out. Ivanisevic himself put it best, saying, "I think I had more self-inflicted injuries in my career than anyone else. I think I could even write a book about it, how to get injured in a way that no one else can." In that same year, he and Mark Philippoussis simultaneously attempted to hit the ball with their head, causing a bloody collision that felt like a Japanese bullet train had hit me. A few years later, he stepped on a seashell at a Miami beach and cut himself so badly it got infected, missing 11 weeks directly before that year's Wimbledon. It could only happen to me, you know? It's a 10-kilometer beach, 1 shell probably, and I found it. It took him a surgery and 2.5 months before he could even walk. But perhaps the biggest injury that was inhibiting his career was his left shoulder, the joint responsible for his record-breaking serves. After the '98 Wimbledon, his shoulder began to hurt more and more, often causing excruciating pain when playing in matches. Goran knew this, but kept on playing anyways. He needed that serve. It was the only way he knew how to win, and without it, he was a mere ghost of his former self. In 1999, his world ranking dropped from 12 to 62. Unable to make it past the 4th round in any singles tournaments that year, forced to watch his now one-sided rivalry with Pete Sampras take home yet another Wimbledon title. The following year would be even worse, featuring his infamous temper tantrum in the first round of the Samsung Open, destroying all 3 of his rackets and defaulting a victory to his confused opponent, Jong-taek Lee of South Korea. "At least when I finish playing tennis, they'll remember me for something," Ivanisevic said. They'll say, "There's that guy who never won Wimbledon, but smashed all his rackets." However horrible this may sound, Goran's rock bottom would extend just a little bit further into the Australian Open, the tournament where it all began. In just a year and a half after facing Sampras in the Wimbledon finals, Ivanisevic had regressed so poorly he was forced to play in a qualifier, the same tournament he competed in as a 17-year-old in 1988. Needless to say, this time it didn't go quite as smoothly. We're reaching the point where Goran's matches were no longer being televised, and he was playing outside of the main complex. All we can go off here is his passionate retelling of the events. I had no idea where the court was. I was looking for it and I was going crazy. It was 800 degrees outside and I couldn't find the court I was meant to be playing on, and I was thinking, bloody hell, is it possible that I've reduced myself to this? Let alone I was playing back a qualifier. Now I couldn't find the court. I hadn't even heard that this court even existed. I thought it was outside the complex, that they'd sent me to play in the car park. In the end, I finally made it to the court, furious at myself, at the entire world, and lost that match royally. The player he lost to was Peter Luxa, a man who would never even win a match in a Grand Slam, and who had a career high ranking of 150. This was Goran Ivanisevic's rock bottom. Given everything we've learned about Goran Ivanisevic, I don't think it will surprise many of you that he is highly superstitious.
I had to go to the same bathroom, same shower, same parking spot. I was very superstitious guy.
He'd have to watch the same show. And the show he happened to be watching before the 2001 Wimbledon was Teletubbies.
1, 2, 3.
With nothing left to lose, pinning his hope on a children's television show was completely ridiculous. But then again, luck was on Goran's side. Despite his plummet in the world ranking, Wimbledon awarded him a wildcard spot based on his previous success, or perhaps the hope that he would throw another tantrum and make the opening rounds a little more exciting. At his last practice, though, before the tournament, he was playing with a close friend and pro tennis player, Nenad Zimovic, who was quoted saying, "I've never seen you serve like that." Ivanisevic wouldn't return a single serve the entire day and was left bewildered at Goran's sudden return to form. Before his first match, Goran would binge-watch his favorite Teletubby, Tinky Winky, the purple one for anyone who was wondering, and then slaughter poor qualifier Fredrik Johnson in the opening round. Ironically enough, the Croatian's motivation to win Wimbledon was not so much the glory, but rather the party he imagined in his hometown of Split. And after his second round demolition against the seeded Carlos Moya, he saw that seafront party as a possibility. I like to imagine Ivanisevic's routine the night before each of his matches. Watch Teletubbies, take 5 to 6 painkillers for his excruciating shoulder pain, and then dream about a huge blowout party. It's not your typical athlete's mindset in the biggest tournament of their life. A special part of Ivanisevic that we haven't talked much about so far was his extravagant and overly embellished celebrations. After his third round victory against a young Andy Roddick, Goran began to strip his shirt off, much to the joy of female spectators. However, the rest of the world and media began writing him off.
He talks about me. Goran is not in the picture. I'm just somebody who plays Andy Roddick in the third round.
Belittling his poor opponents for losing to the washed-up Croatian, who could barely even hold a racket.
Remember the poor Moya, they gave him such a bad time on the press conference. How can you lose to Goran? He said, but he's playing well. Oh, come on.
After a fourth-round onslaught against Rusadesky, he was asked about his wonky shoulder, to which he replied, "I am praying every night it doesn't fall off. So far, it's working fine." His Cinderella run would continue without hiccups until the semi-final matchup against a certain Tim Henman, the hometown Brit with all the momentum in the world. In many ways, Henman was similar to Ivanisevic, a serve and volleyer who found himself losing again and again to Pete Sampras, until this year when a young Swiss player by the name of Roger Federer took down the former champion and opened the door for the underdog, who promptly defeated Federer and moved on to the semi-finals, where British television was guaranteeing a victory.
Nobody talked about me in the semi-finals. It was Agassi, Rafter, Henman, and somebody who is named Goran. And Henman first time playing somebody else that is not Sampras in the semi-finals, so he was already in the final.
Henman was 4-0 against the wild Croatian, and looked to be in prime form to defeat him triumphantly on his home soil.
I knew that he's nervous and a lot of expectation. On the first set, I was really better through almost whole second set. And then I slipped a little bit, he started to play better, and then everything turned around.
After Henman stole that second set from Ivanisevic, a similar series of horrifying events began to unfold.
Again, rock solid.
Strong service game here, just settle down.
Comes out for a shot.
Again. Mind-boggling.
Goran was outplayed and outmatched, and looked like the washed-up player that everyone expected him to be. However, fate was still on Ivanisevic's side.
And then my friend from up there sent the rain. And I saw Tim's face when the rain came. On his face, I said, that was it. Something is gonna happen. So we came to the locker room. I was pretty upset. I don't know why. Till Mark Miles came. In the locker room, I say, guys, that's it for today. See you tomorrow. And from that moment, I knew that I'm in the final. Don't ask me how, but that was it.
And there it is. A wild card. Goran Ivanisevic, for the fourth time, will play for the Wimbledon Championship.
Due to the rain delays in the semi-finals, the match was rescheduled to be played on what's now known as People's Monday. Fans were camping outside the arena, and it was estimated that over 5,000 people were waiting outside the club by 7 a.m. that morning, earning a chance at an elusive, unreserved seat. This led to a rather unique atmosphere that mirrored a football game, the opposite of the usual Wimbledon crowd. Goran equivocated this to a unique vibe of that of a Premier League match, with the rowdy bunch equally split between Rafter and Ivanisevic. And unbeknownst to them, they were about to witness one of the greatest tennis matches ever. Ivanisevic would dominate set number 1, his serve looking more unstoppable than ever. He would set the record for the most aces at Wimbledon with 213, beating his own record of 206 back in '92. At multiple points, the crowd got so loud that the announcer had to quiet them down for the game to continue.
Remember that Rafter has not played a big server at all in this championships.
Rafter would solve Ivanisevic's serve and break him to take the second set. The game would continue along this trajectory, with Rafter and Ivanisevic exchanging blows of momentum. However, down 3-2 in the fourth set, the crowd got their first look at the mad Goran Ivanisevic.
Well, it's clear what he thinks.
And as entertaining as this outburst was, it rattled him for the rest of the set. And for a second, it looked as though he was falling down the same spiral that consumed him in all of his past finals.
Final sets.
But this time, something was different. He didn't fold in the final set, but flourished, and matched Rafter until a deadlock at 7.
First time ever I'm serving for the Wimbledon. I mean, the last game was probably the craziest, most exciting, I don't know, most nervous game I ever played in my life.
Championship point.
And put psychological pressure on him.
On his fourth match point, his fourth Wimbledon final, and as the 125th ranked wildcard, Goran Ivanisevic has a chance to rewrite his entire career of underachieving, failure, and achieve something no man has ever done before. This is the climax of the tale of Wimbledon's greatest underdog. Ivanisevic would have his party back in his hometown of Split, where more than 100,000 people attended. Goran would never even sniff the finals of another major tournament, but to him, none of that mattered. His 2001 Cinderella run was enough glory for an entire career, and he could care less if he played tennis ever again.